So this morning, out of that text that was just read, I want to really look closely at one of the sentences, and it's when Jesus says, "Why are you so afraid?" So I want you to hear that question this morning for your life. Now, this is not one for you to answer out loud or anything, but just think about that question for your life. He didn't ask, "What are you afraid of?" He just says, "Why are you so afraid?" You know, we end up with lots of opponents in our life. If you're on a team, if you like the Gators and all that, they've got, so who was their latest opponent?
Missouri.
You know, if you're on a team, no matter what sports team that is, you're going to have some, I don't even know if they won or lost.
We won.
Oh, woohoo! Okay. And so, if you're on a sports team, you're going to have some opponents. But opponents come in other ways as well. An opponent of a marriage could be unfaithfulness. An opponent for our health could be cancer. An opponent for our family could be anger. An opponent for each of us as individuals could be self-doubt. There are so many opponents in life. We can have an opponent when it comes to our bank account, and that opponent could be our debt. We can have an opponent when it comes to a friendship with someone, and that opponent could be our jealousy. We can have an opponent when it comes to our freedom, and that opponent could be an addiction or a bad habit. We can have an opponent when it comes to our spiritual growth, and that opponent can be our priorities. We can have an opponent when it comes to our ability to love the world and show compassion, and that opponent could be our judgment of others. But out of all those opponents, and we could just name them and name them and name them, our biggest opponent in life is fear. Fear is the only opponent that we have that can keep us from ever starting the race that the Bible says that we are supposed to run. Each of us individually in God's purpose. So it's the only opponent that can keep us from finishing a race because we never started the race because we were too full of fear, too afraid. Fear is the only opponent that Jesus says to the disciples in our text, we're going to the other side. Fear is the only opponent we have that can keep us from going to the other side, because fear is the one thing in this world that can make us forget that Jesus is right there in the boat with us. Fear begins in our minds. It begins in our mind. And it works. It works to make us forget what God has done. And worse than that, it works to make us feel forgotten by God. Why do you think it bothered the disciples so much that Jesus had fallen asleep in this boat? They felt forgotten. Just wiggle your toes in your shoes if you've ever had one of those moments, where you've been praying and praying and it just feels like God isn't listening and you just think God's gone to sleep on the job because nothing's happening. That's in a way that feeling of being forgotten by God, and that's what fear has a PhD in. Fear, our greatest opponent. Fear is a bully. Fear wakes up every morning with its long, slimy arms and negative goo oozing out of it. And this is what it does. It wraps its arms around you, pretending like it's your friend. And it whispers enough doubt in your mind that pretty soon your self-worth plummets and your low self-esteem begins to just eke and ooze into your day. Fear wakes up every morning with its slimy arms arms and the negativity oozing from it, it can wrap its arms around a church, saddle up to them and act like it knows how they feel. Whisper words like, you're not big enough, you don't have enough money, you're not strong enough, you're not going to make it. And pretty soon, as those arms wrap around a body, a family, a church, a school, a neighborhood, a community, as those arms, those slimy arms, wrap around that community of people, and it begins to whisper those things, pretty soon, negativity oozes into every conversation. Fear will bully happiness until it up and leaves. Fear will bully growth until it stops growing. Fear will bully spiritual growth until you stop praying. Fear will bully your freedom until you go back to how you were, or back to an addiction or a bad habit or a past you needed to leave or a situation you've outgrown. Finally, as fear goes on this process, the next thing that happens is fear opens up a travel agency. Promises you to take you on a trip. And fear asks that you bring all your baggage with you. And different than what Jesus did with the disciples on this trip, Jesus said, where did he say we're going? To the other side. He was very clear. He didn't say we're going to sail out onto the Sea of Galilee. I had no clue where we're going. I'm waiting on God to tell me. Let me see. We'll just see. We might picnic and just come back to shore. Jesus is very clear. He says we are going to the other side. But you see, when God's in control of the situation, eventually you're going to get some clues, if not right on the first end of it, about where you're going. But the thing that you can always count on with fear is that it never tells you where you're going. And so it opens up this travel agency, invites you on a trip, and says, Dawn, Jean, Nancy, bring all your baggage with you. We're going on a trip. And you don't even ask, we don't ask the question always where you're going. We climb into fear's boat, and we get out in the middle of our own Sea of Galilee, and the storms come up, and fear just sits there with that ooze dripping off of it. Those big slimy arms around you, offering nothing except cheering you on when panic sets in. Now here's the worst part. Once fear gets you in that place, it does a makeover on you. Now, the disciples in that boat, the whole goal was to follow Jesus in hopes of, can you imagine walking with Jesus every day, watching what he did? You would just be going, I just want to be like him. I want to look like that. I want to talk like that. I want to walk like that. I want to be able to heal like that. I want to be able to speak like that. I want to be able to love like that. But now fear wants to do a makeover on you, because the last thing fear wants is for you to look like Jesus and for me to look like Jesus. So after you've gone on your trip with fear and you're out there with fear and panic has set in and that ooze is just rolling off of fear onto you, the next thing fear starts is your makeover. And fear wants you to look like fear itself. Remember, fear is a bully. So fear wants you to look like a bully. Now, psychologists have studied people, us in humanity, who become overwhelmed by fear. When we become overwhelmed by fear, when we live that for a length of time and it becomes our norm, what sets in is that we should never experience discomfort. So, if you've been overwhelmed with fear all your life, you eventually get to a place that you think you should never experience discomfort. So when you do, you're a bully to whatever is giving you that discomfort. Wow. So let's think about this now for a moment. We have this amazing story of Jesus and the disciples on the lake. Now, isn't it interesting that Jesus spends so much of his ministry on this Sea of Galilee? and on its shores. A body of fresh water where violent storms come up. It has like cliffs that are 2,000 feet high in places where they roll up from it. Even in 1992, there was a storm so bad on it that there was a 7 to 10 foot storm surge in the cities around it. Now, isn't it interesting that most of Jesus' ministry, much of it, happens on this lake or on the shores of it where there are violent storms? Because I'm thinking I've had some violent storms in my life, and I'm not talking about thunder and lightning. I'm talking about the thunder and lightning of anger, of disappointment, of death or pain. And isn't it interesting that Jesus gives us this story centered in a place where a violent storm can roll up without any warning? Wiggle your toes in your shoes if you've ever had, metaphorically, a violent storm in your life you didn't expect. Mm-hmm. Look at that. We're all wiggling our toes in our shoes. We're all like those disciples in that boat. We have experienced this moment on our own Sea of Galilee. Now, I also wonder about a couple of other things. So, Jesus being asleep, that makes you wonder, do we have that story? Is that part in there for those moments we feel like Jesus has gone asleep at the steering wheel of our boat? When those prayers don't seem to be answered, when it seems like nothing is happening or changing? I wonder what Jesus actually said. It says that he rebuked the wind and the waves and they stopped, but it doesn't say what he said. What do you think he said? Say it out loud if you've got an idea. I know it's hard to imagine, isn't it? I wrestled with this all week long. Like, did he go, I told you not to come up right now? Or did he say, okay, wind, you can slow down now, they got it? I mean, what did he say? It's hard to even come up with it, isn't it? And it says rebuked. What does rebuked really mean? We could go back and look at the meaning of that word, but there's something deeper here. There's something deeper in that. The creator of the world in that boat, with just a few words, a look, a glance, whatever the rebuking was, completely brought that storm to still. I think the deeper part of that might be the creator of the world has a language with the world that we don't fully understand. And then maybe even if we knew what he had said to that wind and the waves, what that communication was, it's so far beyond what we can comprehend of who Jesus is and was, that it's not there because it'd be lost on us. We can't even understand the language. I wonder, I'm thinking of Matthew, who had been the tax collector. I'm wondering what would have happened if he had stood up in that boat, as best he could with that rocking. If he'd stood up in that boat and he'd looked at those winds and those waves and he just called it out. And he just said, okay, storm, okay. I'm rocking because the boat was rocking, you know. Okay, storm, you show me something you've done. Tell me about something you've done that my God can't do. And I'll tell you something about my God that you can't do. I wonder what would have happened if those disciples had looked at their storm, and if each one of us look at our storms, and we call the truth out in that storm, and we say, storm, fear, tell me something you can do that my God can't do. So, you hear this. Now you go to your front door, you know how you look to see who's there? And you look and it's fear. There it is. Persistent. Won't stop. You look again, yep, still there. You cower. You look again, yep, fear's still there. So the first thing you want to do when fear knocks on your door is turn the light on. Turn the light of God on that fear. Turn it on that fear. And open that door. Talk through the door. Whatever you got to do. And the first thing you do is say, you are uninvited. Say that.
You are uninvited.
Who sent you here?
Who sent you here?
Because my Jesus said, and still says today, my peace I leave with you. So you are uninvited fear. Now the minute you do that, there's fear standing in that spotlight with all its slime, getting stripped of all of its power. And if it doesn't slink away then, you go on to the next thing. And you say, fear, tell me what you can do in my situation that God cannot do. And I might listen. Is fear going to have anything to say? Mm-mm. If fear still doesn't slink away, then you remind fear that there's no room in your house, your holy temple, your life for fear, because you already have a resident. Do you know who your resident is? Do you know who's living inside of you, in your life, in your church, in your home, in your work, in your car, in your bathtub, in your shower, in your kitchen, in your refrigerator, everywhere you can go and be? Who's living there with you? God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, put whatever name you want to on it. You already have a resident. You don't have any room for fear. And so you just tell fear, there is no room for you, because the one who lives within me is King Jesus, and two of his favorite words are fear not. So I'm not thinking you're going to like living in this place anyway. And if fear still doesn't slink away, this is what you do. You say, okay, present me a list of your accomplishments, fear. Now, it's going to be a short list. Nothing's going to be on that list because fear has no accomplishments. Fear never wrote a song, never had a vision, never dreamed a dream, never composed a symphony, never graduated from college, never applied for a new job, never did a makeover to make itself be something better in the eyes of God. Most of all, fear has never moved a mountain and never calmed a storm. I wonder if in our story today, where the danger really was, what was most dangerous? Was it the storm? Or was it the fear? What presented the most danger to the disciples? Was it the storm that was happening around them in their life in that moment? Or was it their fear? What had the best chance of stopping them dead in their tracks, held hostage to that moment of a violent storm? Was it the wind and the waves? Or was it their fear? Fear never adds. It always subtracts. That's why it has no accomplishments. It can't birth a baby. It can't grow a child. It can't grow a school. It can't grow a church. It shows no compassion. Fear can't solve the problem of hunger in the world, nor come up with any ideas to make it better. Fear always subtracts. Fear treats every day like it's Halloween. I'm about to ruin Halloween for you if Halloween's your favorite holiday. That's such a fun time. But fear treats every day like it's Halloween. And it dresses up and comes to you like it can do something for you. Like it can make things better. Like it has the solution or the answer. Or like just living in it will make you a better person, even a better Christian, a better follower of Christ. And it shows up every day in that disguise. And if it doesn't get you one way, it'll disguise itself in another way. And so, to live and speak those words of faith and to begin to live fearless is a choice that we make, a choice we make through our faith in everything we do in life. And it's a choice to be less fearful today than we were yesterday, less fearful tomorrow than we are today. less fearful on Tuesday than we were on Monday. Fear wants to take our gaze off of Jesus, who is in the boat with us, and put it on the storm, put it on the slimy arms of fear that are trying to convince you that it has everything under control. So we make that choice. We make that choice to speak faith over our fear when we say to our fear, fear, show me something you can do that my God cannot